Great. Okay, so that sounds really loud now. Hopefully it's okay. Okay, so yeah, we wanted to do... I think we'll be all right, thank you. We wanted to talk to you today about lived experience in campaigning, so what it means to campaign with and alongside and for people who are very directly affected by the campaigning that you're doing. So first, a little bit about us. So start with Brendan.
Hi, my name is Brendan and I am on the steering group for Kidney Well.
Great, and I'm Eve. I've worked at MenCap for about 5 years, and before that I was living in Palestine and campaigning in Palestine, and before that for a freedom of expression organisation. So some of the issues that we're talking about today are things that I've tried to talk about in, or kind of think about in lots of different roles, and what we wanted to do today is just talk you through our kind of big questions. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Here are some questions we ask yourself.
So what I should say first is that we're absolutely and by no means experts on this. All we wanted to do is just talk to you about some of the kind of big questions that we're asking. People call this lots of different things. They call it user involvement, service user involvement, experts by experience. It's basically just being kind of people-centered and understanding how our campaigning is or isn't bringing the people who are most directly affected by it on board with us. The other thing I wanted to say is that some of this kind of seems really obvious in the sense that a lot of campaigning starts with people who have a cause and have an issue, but I know that I'm more of an ally. I don't have a learning disability myself. I just have grown up with people with a learning disability, but it's not something I've experienced, so I think there's just a lot of questions that we need to ask ourselves about our kind of role. So, question number one.
Who has been more involved in our campaign?
So I think this is a bit of an existential one. It's kind of soul-searching question for any organisation. Who are we there for? Are we helping to shift power in the direction of people who have less of it? In our case, that's people with a learning disability, but I think it's a good kind of overall question to ask yourselves.
How many people with lived experience have their job in the team?
So, of course, this is going to be relevant for any organisation that's campaigning with people in the UK. It's potentially less relevant if you're an organisation campaigning with like children on the other side of the world. But in our team at MenCap, we have 4 paid members of staff out of 12 who have a learning disability. We're really trying to think about kind of appropriate jobs to have. Maybe it's job carving, so making a role for someone that suits the kind of hours that they want to work, suits the skills they have. If they can't use a computer, then it's not a computer-based job, and just being really flexible about that. And one thing I wanted to mention was that anyone who applies for a job at MenCap is interviewed by a panel of people who have a learning disability. And I think that's a really nice way that we just ensure that people who don't have a learning disability who work for MenCap really understand what it might feel like and have a kind of deep sense of like solidarity. Okay.
What other words are there in the campaign from the beginning? Case studies.
Okay, so I think as campaigners, we're all really good at thinking about case studies and using stories and who's got the best story. But what are there, if someone has a really good story to tell, are you asking them to do other things apart from just turning up and telling their story? Are there also people who have a lived experience of something different and they don't have a big story to tell, but they really want to get involved in other ways? So like giving people perks from if you've got any corporate sponsors and they've got perks, like, do those people get the perks? Are they involved in campaign leadership locally? Are they being stewards at your events? When it's all hands on deck with a big moment, are you getting out to them and bringing them into your offices? And kind of looking beyond the case study model.
Are people live experiment involved in leadership and strategy?
So with our current campaign, which is a 2.5 year hospital care campaign, we've set up a steering group of 14 people with a learning disability who are paid to advise us on the campaign. Brendan is one of those members, and the aim of that group is really to guide and shape and direct the campaign, and that they take leadership for our strategy.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. How much money have we got to involve people?
Okay, so I went to an event recently with the head of prisoner engagement at the Prison Reform Trust, who's absolutely amazing, by the way, and she said, show me your budget and I'll show you how serious you are about involving people, and I think that's just something to really bear in mind. Like, it's time intensive and money intensive sometimes to involve people really properly, and if you don't have money, then just make sure you're putting in the time and you're thinking really as carefully as you can.
Who are the experts in our company?
Okay, so for this one, we're kind of thinking, so who is it that's sitting on the sofa for breakfast TV when your campaign launches? Whose quote is in the press release? We know that people with a learning disability particularly have like a very, very low profile in society and in the media, and what are we doing to change that and to make sure that people are shown to be experts? I think it's also acknowledging that an expertise doesn't just come from the fact that they have a learning disability or they're affected by an issue. It actually comes from being networked, being knowledgeable, genuinely being an expert in your topic. Yeah.
Whose voices are the largest in our campaign?
So this is our final point, which is just, you may have very well got to the stage where you've got a really good connected bunch of people who have experience and a direct experience of your topic. Are you doing anything to get beyond those voices and to bring in new voices? One thing that we're doing at the moment is a big push on our health campaign in May around people with profound and multiple learning disabilities. It usually would be non-verbal, maybe communicate not using words, but through gesture or touch. And we're really fascinated about that voice and how we're going to bring that voice out and really give that group a platform. So that's it. I hope we've come in under time. But yeah, our final points.
I think that right question.
That's it. Thank you very much.